There is a lot that goes into selecting the perfect wakeboard for you. Now, keep in mind, a lot of it is preference based, and if you haven't developed those preferences yet, that's okay. I want to walk you through a few different things to consider when making a wakeboard purchase. A really important aspect of selecting the right wakeboard is the size. If your wakeboard is not the right size for you, it doesn't matter how great of a board it is, it's not going to perform very well. Now, a lot of people are often afraid to go up in size when I often encourage it, especially to a lot of my students. A little bit bigger wakeboard is going to allow you to ride higher on the surface of the water with less drag, so you're going to be able to ride for longer without feeling so bogged down. It also allows you to slow the speed down to sliding speeds and one wake jumps and doing all the things that someone is going to need to do in the early stages of their progression without being just bogged down and slow in the water with a small board. The bigger surface area lets you sit higher on the water, reduces drag, makes your pop a little bit more abrupt, makes your landings a little softer, and it doesn't feel like a barn door underfoot. The technology in these boards now are so that it's very light, they're really agile, even if they're on a bigger size. So for reference, I'm 6'2", I'm about 175 pounds, and I ride a 146. I'd go up to a 48 or 49 if I could. I really enjoy the bigger size boards. I feel like they're a lot more forgiving for me. However, that doesn't mean that if I have a preference and like a little bit smaller board that a 142 is out of the question. It absolutely is within the range that I could have as a wakeboard for me. I just happen to like the benefits of the boards that are a little bit bigger and they don't feel that heavy underfoot anymore. So if you have the option and you're torn between sizes, size up. It's just gonna make your life a little easier. Most boards have a really user-friendly fin configuration. There's really only one exception to that, and that is the super beginner, really big fin that you're gonna see in the center of some boards. Now, this is not a bad thing, but it needs to be used with purpose, and not everyone knows that purpose. I like to view these as a training wheel in really rough conditions for people who are just starting out and trying to get up on the board for the first time. So it will help your board track straight. However, as soon as you start doing frontside slides or getting switch, it's actually more of a hindrance than it is a help. So if you take this board and you slide it sideways, you now have a ton of drag that this fin is exposing itself to. And that is going to slow the board down, which is going to put the toe down, which means you may catch a front edge. So this training wheel should be removed as soon as the person can get up repeatedly. And sometimes you can take it out right from the get-go if you have really nice water conditions. If it's really choppy out and windy and the person is having a really hard time keeping the board directionally pointed, you can use it as a training tool. However, once this board has the fin removed, it performs very differently, and it can be a very user-friendly board to continue learning and growing. You can land flips and 360s. It's not a beginner board. It only is when you have the training wheel of the fin attached. So don't feel like you're stuck having to keep this fin on the board during the life of the rider. It's really just there to help you from a super beginner standpoint develop the skills that you need to start relying on the edge of the board rather than the fins. Now, another thing to consider when buying a wakeboard is rocker. You're going to hear a lot of different terms. If you're unfamiliar with rocker, that might sound a bit confusing. You're going to have 3-stage and continuous and abrupt continuous, and I wouldn't get too into the weeds on that. I would not worry too much about it. More important than the type of rocker is the amount of rocker. That's what you're going to feel. The amount of rocker is measured by how much the board is bent and the distance between the tip of the board and the ground when laying flat. So that is going to be an indicator for you of how much rocker the board has. The type of rocker these days, unless you already have a preference, is pretty user-friendly regardless. Now, the amount of rocker, I'll just explain really high level the differences between boards that have a lot of rocker and boards that have a little bit of rocker, even though you're not going to see too much differences in the marketplace. But I just want this to kind of ease your confusion about what rocker is and how it affects you. So the more the board is bent, the more drag it has. The harder it is going to be to hold on to the rope for extended periods of time. It is going to get a little bit more pop, a little bit softer landings. However, that drag kind of takes a toll on you after time if it's a lot of rocker. So boards with very little rocker, it's really, really easy to hold onto the handle. The glide speed is really fast. It feels really high on the water. It doesn't feel like it sits low. And that is gonna be affected by having less rocker in the board. So most boards these days are gonna be somewhat of a medium in between feeling. They're not gonna be super flat. They're not gonna be crazy bent. But at least know that when you're talking 3-stage versus continuous and all of that, you're gonna notice the amount of rocker more than you're gonna notice the type of rocker. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. Another thing to consider when buying a wakeboard is the flex pattern and construction. Some boards are built in such a way that it allows for the board to flex underfoot while you're riding. That gives you a different feel. It's a little bit more playful, a little bit more forgiving at times, and is something that is going to be developed as a preference for you over time. If it's something that you're not really sure what you'd like, I wouldn't worry about it too much. Either flex pattern in any board, you're probably going to get used to over time. Even if you don't really love it at first, your riding will start to adapt. So pick something that you think you'd like and ride it for a while and see how you adapt to it. Keep in mind that your preferences will change and shift as you develop as a rider. The board that I preferred 10 years ago is very different than the board that I prefer today. And it's okay if you don't have a preference yet. Pick something that's the right size for you, but that's a pretty user-friendly shape, and you'll develop and learn on that, and you'll develop those preferences that will guide you into your next board.